The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, we got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock, and we start the 2024 edition of Orioles Preview in the exact same way that we started 2023 with the general manager of the Baltimore Orioles, Mike Elias. And if I had told you, Mike, a year ago that you'd finish the season with 101 wins, you'd have the American League Manager of the Year in Brandon Hyde, the American League Rookie of the Year in Gunnar Henderson, and you yourself would be named Major League Executive of the Year, you would have said what?
I would have taken it. I remember talking to you. I was in the airport, and my predictions were a little more muted than that. But, yeah, it was a really nice year for the team. We fell very short in the playoffs, but the regular season was really historic for the Orioles, and we're kind of rolling over that excitement into 2024, and the team had a really strong spring training, and by and large, we finished with decent health, and we're ready to go tomorrow.
Yeah, I wonder if, your expectations were tempered by the fact that you had such a young team. You never know going into a season, but did maybe they go a year earlier than you expected? Like maybe this year you might have expected what happened last year.
Well, we were never ones to put timelines on what we were doing. It was very process-oriented. We started from a very difficult spot. The Orioles at the end of 2018 had 115 losses and a lot of infrastructural issues around the organization that needed to be improved and brought up to speed. And we were really focused on that and just making good decisions and acquiring good players and coaching them up as best we could at every turn. And starting in the middle of 2022, right when we called up Adley Rutschman, the team just started winning organically. And we made more investment in the payroll going into last year, brought in some veteran players to complement our young core, and it worked. So it wasn't anything that we were terribly concerned about putting timelines on, but more just make as many good moves as we could possibly make as quickly as we could make them. And, I'm proud that the team was able to get back to the playoffs in a short amount of time, given where we started from.
But when you talk about timeline, I wonder about this, because only 2 years before you lost 110 games, and there were some who were, drumming their fingers about Adley Rutschman being in the minor leagues and maybe some of your younger players. Did you purposely, keep them back in order not to get necessarily short-term goals, but to make sure they were 100% ready for a season that could unfold like last year?
Yeah, when we develop players nowadays, baseball's really hard, and you need a lot of at-bats, especially, if you're a hitter. You need a lot of at-bats to prepare you for what you're going to see in the majors. And even for the top players, it usually requires a couple of years in the minors. Sometimes it's more. It just depends how they perform. But, you're laying down a base of offensive development, seeing pitches that you haven't seen before. And I think we've done a good job here of developing some of our young high draft picks in relatively short order and getting them prepared for major league success. Because when they come up, they tend to struggle a little bit right out the gate. You want them to have the experiences to draw from to adapt and get through those struggles. And, Adley and Gunnar were both like that. They had a couple of months that were slow, and they grinded through it and really exploded after that.
Yeah, we had Gunnar on a couple of times last year, and we talked about this slow start. Was there ever a point during that start where you thought, maybe we brought him up too soon, we ought to send him back to get his confidence, or did you know that he was going to be able to work through it the way he did?
Well, we were very confident he would work through it, and everything we were looking at and talking about, everyone had confidence that this would be a matter of time. But honestly, yes, the conversation started to bubble up as he continued to be frustrated. And we continue to have confidence that sometimes for their sake, you want them to go down and get a reset. But even though his production was low in the first half, he was still drawing a lot of walks, still playing really good defense. And the walks in particular kind of bode well that possibly a breakout's coming. So we hung with him, and before too late, he really started to turn it on, and he got used to seeing some of the left-handed pitching that was giving him fits too, and that's something that he's still getting better at. But but slowly got over the hump.
Now, we talk about this, too, and Cal Ripken weighed in on this, and he said he'd like to see Gunnar play shortstop all the time. Gunnar has said, it's okay with him. He'll shift between third and short. Is the goal to get him a singular position, or could he still, shift back and forth this year?
Well, he's an excellent shortstop. So, first and foremost, that's where we want him, and that's his best position. Very big, very athletic kid. And in spring training, he only played shortstop. He played a lot of third base coming up in the minors, and he played some third base last year. And we do that because of our roster composition. And we have other players that, if they're in the game, they can't go to third base. They're more second basemen or shortstops or outfielders. And sometimes you ask other people on the team to slide around to accommodate the other players who are in the game. So I think that's an important tool in your toolbox for players these days. But it's not something that we want to distract from somebody's primary position. And so this year, I expect we're going to see Gunnar out at shortstop the Lions' share of the time. But if he wants to or needs to slide over on a certain day, we want to preserve that option too.
Talking to Mike Elias, Major League Baseball Executive of the Year, General Manager of the Baltimore Orioles. You mentioned payroll up last year to $66 million. You're projected at $98 this year. You have new ownership. I don't know whether there's a directive or a strategy. Has anything changed in that regard with David Rubenstein taking over as the new owner?
Well, I think it's something that is very exciting for the team to have an infusion of leadership and investment from a group that is very locally oriented. And you talk about David Rubenstein. He was born here, a lot of ties to the area and a lot of passion towards being supportive of Baltimore, the Orioles, Maryland, you name it. So the perfect guy for that. One thing that's been unique is this ownership transition's happening kind of right around opening day, spring training, this time of year that we're in. And a lot of things for the season are very set once that's the case. So, these transitions can be hectic. There are a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that it takes for it to become official at the league level. And all that is still playing out as of this hour. So, it's something we're excited. The whole organization is excited. David is extremely excited, as partners. And we need to give everybody time to get settled in before we sit down and talk too much business.
Yeah, well, you've said over the years, look, when we need to spend money, we'll spend money. And you have built what used to be the Oriole way. You've done it with homegrown talent. And there are teams, see the Mets of last year, who spent wildly and it didn't work out. I would think that you will stick with your strategy no matter how open the purse strings are for you. Wouldn't that be the case?
Well, I think there are multiple ways to skin a cat, so to speak, and to put together a winning baseball team. I think the one that the Orioles have successfully focused on in yesteryear and are focusing on again, and it's what's really going to work here in Baltimore, is having a homegrown core. And, you want to pay those players as they get raises and hopefully stay. And you also need to bring outside talent in to supplement them. And that's what's been happening. And you see our payrolls going up by the year, especially as we've gotten into this winning mode. And the important thing to me from my position are the win totals and the results on the wins. Obviously, there's correlation involved with your major league payroll there, but the main thing we're focused on is success and winning. And, that's the primary consideration. But it's something that's not cheap or easy in Major League Baseball, and we want to be prepared for whatever investments are necessary to keep and maintain the success that we feel we've built.
All right, as an old-timer, I need an education on how to look at numbers now. You made a big trade in the offseason for Corbin Burns, who I guess you hope will be your ace this year. It's 10-8 last season. Now, when I was a kid, if you'd have said the ace is coming in and he was 10-8 last year, I go, that's nice. But how do you judge? His ERA is very good, and a couple of years ago he led the league in ERA. But what goes into judging pitching right now and starting pitching the way things are viewed in Major League Baseball these days?
That's a big part of our jobs in the front office is doing the best we can to predict the future, which obviously that's about as difficult as it sounds, especially when it comes to baseball players. But there are certain things in their resumes, and statistical resumes, and then also in their scouting profiles that are very meaningful when you're thinking about, okay, what's this person going to do next year or in 5 years? And so that's what we spend all of our time and expertise getting better at here in the front office or in the scouting department. And, Corbin Burns, he's had seasons that are better than others on paper. He won a Cy Young and, he's had a tremendous career. And so we try to look across the body of work. We look at his stuff and we have an idea of what we think this guy is hopefully going to provide for us in 2024 based on that. And his wins and losses with the team last year, there's a lot of luck and happenstance involved in how pitchers are credited with wins and losses. So, it's not totally non-correlative to what they might do the next year, but there are other things that are much stronger indicators that we tend to make our moves based upon. And I think he's going to have a great season for us. It was a huge acquisition. He's going to be on the mound tomorrow, opening day, which will be really exciting for everybody. And we're really hopeful that this is the person who will be our game one starter if we're fortunate enough to advance in October.
Yeah, and speaking of October, the incredible streak that you guys had with 84 consecutive series wins, which I think says a lot about the competitiveness of your team, that they weren't getting out of town without a win, to make sure about that. But then you get into the crushing defeat against Texas where you do get swept. And I wonder, in roster construction, do you think about, hey, this would be great for the regular season, but what we're going to need to do to get over the playoff hump is to do that? Is there different thinking in that direction as you assemble a roster?
Well, it's really tricky because you play a lot of games in the regular season in baseball, and you play them basically every single day. And so much of your regular season roster planning is involved with the depth of your team and when so-and-so needs a day off or when a bullpen arm is tired or, who's picking up the slack the next night. And in the playoffs, that becomes much less of a consideration. And there's probably a little bit more leverage put on who are your frontline guys in each position and who's your closer and things like that, because the playoffs, both schedule and the amount of competition that we have, it exposes the bottom of your roster a little bit less than the regular season does. Mm-hmm. The problem is you need to get to the playoffs, and that's the most important thing. So, we tend to drive most of our planning through the regular season, as any team would do, through the lens of the regular season. But you have to keep an eye on what that playoff roster might look at. And I think that's why you tend to see a lot of activity at the trade deadline, as it becomes a little clearer who's really going to make the playoffs and who's not. Mm-hmm. And those teams will then make additional investments at the deadline if they can find the right deal.
A couple of quick getaway things. Felix Bautista is going to sit out the season after the Tommy John surgery. Such a big factor in what you did in the early part of the season and into the second half. What's your closing strategy this year?
It's a huge loss for us. Felix last year is about as good as a relief pitcher as I've seen. And to have him injure his ulnar collateral ligament in September was a big blow for us, right, going into the playoffs. So we have other good relievers. Yenier Cano was an all-star last year. We got a lot of guys that we really trust. And we brought in Craig Kimbrell, the veteran closer, who's putting together a Hall of Fame caliber career and moving up the all-time saves list to bring some additional experience into the back end of the bullpen. So as we broke spring training, I think we felt confident with where the bullpen's at. It was good health. We got a few guys from the left side. We got a few guys from the right side. We've got several guys, including Craig, that you trust to handle the ninth inning and has that experience. But, this is going to be an area where life without Felix, something that's new for us and new for our manager, Brandon. And, we may experience some transition there, but we'll see. I think we're in good shape, relatively speaking. But bullpen's always an area where you can tinker and look to improve if you're having issues as the season goes along.
And the last thing is a lot of fans excited about Jackson Holliday, number one prospect in baseball. You elected not to keep him on the opening day roster. I would think that good health is a good thing for you, and the best case scenario is he doesn't come up because of injury, or do you want to see him progress in the minor leagues and be on the major league roster this year?
Well, we're definitely hoping that he forces his way onto the major league roster at some point this season. He was very close. It was a close decision to not add him to the team. Ultimately, we're talking about a guy that's hopefully a generational talent. He's certainly performing that way thus far in the minor leagues. And he got to AAA last year at age 19. I think he had 18 games there. He did pretty well. And now, as we roll into 2024, we're looking at a position change from shortstop to second base as he slides over to be playing with Gunnar Henderson next to him. And in particular, his experience level and success level against tough left-handed pitching, of which he's going to see a ton in the major leagues, is still a work in progress. So there's stuff to work on, the stuff that we'll be keeping an eye on, but a talent like his, when it's ready, you figure out a way to accommodate that. So again, I think that this is an area where we've demonstrated a lot of good capability and sense as to how and when to develop these players and advance them in the minor leagues. And so we're going to stick with our process.
All right. Well, congratulations on a great year from last year. You're opening at home, I believe, first time since 2018 tomorrow, which is
feels that way.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing, and it's a credit to what you were able to do. And if we don't talk again until the day before opening day next year, I wish you even more success than you had last year.
Well, thank you, Andy. Nice to be on the show.
Good to talk to you. Good luck this year. Thanks so much. That's Mike Elias, the general manager of the Orioles. Done a spectacular job. They lost 110 games in 2021, won 101 last year. And by the way, we didn't even get into this when he talked about sort of tempered expectations going into the year. It looked like the Rays were going to run away and hide. And no pun intended with the manager, but the Rays didn't collapse. They had 99 wins. That would have won the other two divisions. And that's usually good enough to win a division. But the Orioles kept coming and coming and coming, and they won a big series against them in June and were able to win the division. Unfortunately, they didn't perform as well in the playoffs, but they lost to the eventual world champion. So a great year for them, and we hope for great things again this year as we're home for the Orioles as we start the season tomorrow. Coming up, a couple more Orioles notes as we wrap things up. It's Orioles Preview. You're listening to ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We're wrapping up our first Orioles preview of the year. First pitch tomorrow at Camden Yards against the Angels, 3:05. Our coverage here will start at 2 o'clock as we will be your home for Orioles baseball throughout the year. And they always set opening day up like this just in case there's rain. I guess there is rain in the forecast, though I did hear it was going to stop in the morning, so they'll probably play tomorrow afternoon. But just in case, you got Friday open for that. And then they would play again on Saturday. That's a Saturday afternoon game at 4 o'clock and close out the series on Sunday at 1:35. And then the Royals come to town on April 1st. That'll be a night game, 6:30, as the Nationals are opening up. Their home opener is going to be Monday at 4 o'clock. Just a couple of quick follow-up things from talking to Mike Elias, who's just done a spectacular job taking over a franchise that was a complete mess. He hired Brandon Hyde and stuck with him. Hyde had to take all those losses, the 110, and he stuck it out, and he seems to be very much of a player's manager, and they seem to respond very well to him, and he kept them on track. When you're not being swept in 84 consecutive series, that tells me that they've got really competitive guys. Like, you lose your first two games of a 3-game series, and you're just totally discouraged, and you go, let's get the hell out of this town, and you kind of mail it in for the third game. They didn't do that, and that's 84 consecutive series until they ran into the Texas Rangers. And that's the thing about baseball is that the postseason is so different than the regular season. This isn't really anything new. Like the Braves were an incredible dynasty in the 1990s. Yet they won one World Series. They were there all the time. They just didn't win. And they won one with maybe one of the greatest pitching staffs ever assembled, Hall of Famers, 3 of them, and they just couldn't do it. So that's something that they have to think about. But I think, and Mike didn't really admit this, but I feel like they arrived like a year earlier than they expected. Like they were thinking maybe they were a wild card team last year and just getting into the playoffs would be a big thing. In some ways it was, but also after you get 101 wins and you overtake a team that came out of the box flying in Tampa. I think they were at one point like 35-3 or something like that. And to overtake them at the end of the season says a lot about your team and how much they improved this year. I asked him about Jackson Holliday at the end. It was great hope that he would break camp with them. Not quite ready to do that, but he could be, part of an incredible infield, playing next to the American League Rookie of the Year this past season in Gunnar Henderson, the shortstop, second base combination. They've got some veteran help now. They've signed an infielder. Tony Kemp is going to play second base until he's ready to go. If Holliday is ready to go this year. But you got to like what they've done. I mean, this is all kinds of fun, and we'll see if they can continue. But this is the way the Orioles were. This is how they built that dynasty. I would say dynasty, but it was pretty close to that. 1966 to 1983, they won 3 World Series. They were in the playoffs almost every year. They were in the World Series a couple of times against the Pirates and lost. But that was a team built with homegrown talent, and the big addition was maybe one of the greatest trades ever made, where they got Frank Robinson, who was the kind of the straw that stirred the drink. But gotta like what you see, and always good to talk to Mike Elias, and we'll continue to do Orioles preview every Wednesday at 10:30. Opening day tomorrow as they get started against the Angels. I want to thank Rex Minturn for running the show. Thanks to Mike Elias for coming on. Tony is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.